Hello, Mrs. Bowe here again. This video is about solving linear inequalities. Linear inequalities are similar to linear equations, but they're going to have an inequality, so either a less than, a greater than or equal to, or a less than or equal to instead of an equal sign. They're solved exactly the same way, unless you divide by a negative number. And as we've been talking about, their result is going to be a range of numbers rather than a single answer. So let's look at example 4. Solve 2x plus 3 is less than or equal to 5. And we want to give our final answer in interval notation. So when solving this, we start by doing the exact same thing as we normally would do with an equation. We want to get the x term by itself. So since we're adding 3 currently, we subtract 3 from both sides of the inequality. My plus 3 minus 3 will cancel. And so on the left, I'll only have 2x, and on the right, I'll have 5 minus 3, excuse me. So 2x is less than or equal to 2. Next, we want to get rid of the 2 in front of the x. So we do that since it's currently being multiplied, we do that by dividing. Those 2's cancel, and I'm left with x is less than or equal to, and then 2 divided by 2 is 1. This is an inequality, and we need to get this into interval notation for our final answer. So I'm just going to go ahead and draw this out on a number line. So my value that I'm going to be including here, I'll try to use this one, see how it goes. I want everything less than 1. So that's going to be all of this wherever. And then I need to consider whether I'm going to include or exclude 1. And I have a less than or equal to symbol there. So that means it's going to include the 1. So now when I write it in interval notation, I write the starting value and then the ending value. Always put the smallest value on the left, just like on the number line. So it starts at negative infinity, and it goes up to 1. And then I have to decide, do I use parentheses or brackets? I always use parentheses on infinity or negative infinity. And then here on my 1, because this is less than or equal to, since I have a closed circle, that means I use a bracket. So that is my solution to this linear inequality. Notice as I was solving it, I used exactly the same steps that I used when solving a linear equation. And these are going to use the same steps unless you're dividing by a negative number there, and there's a little hiccup, and we'll see examples of that in just a moment. Let's look at our next example. Solve negative 2x plus 10 is greater than 8. And we want to give our final answer in interval notation. So here again, I want to get the term with the variable in it by itself. So I'm going to start to do that by getting rid of that 10. I'm currently adding 10, so I'm going to subtract it from both sides. Here on the left, I still have my negative 2x. My plus 10 minus 10 cancels, and it's going to be greater than 8 minus 10 is negative 2. Now, to get the x by itself, I need to divide by what is multiplied by, which is negative 2 in this case. Now, in this case, we need to be really careful because we are dividing by that negative number. My negatives 2's cancel, but now I need to flip the direction of the inequality. So anytime you divide by a negative number, flip the direction of the inequality. So this problem started out as greater than, and now it's a less than because I divided by a negative number. And on the right, my -2 divided by -2 is 1. I just kind of randomly made this one up, so it's kind of weird that it came out so similarly to the last question, but that's okay. Here I've got my number line. I want all my values less than 1. So it's going to be smaller than it. It's going to go on forever. I need to consider if I'm including or not my 1. And since I have a less than here and not less than or equal to, this is going to be an open circle. Lastly, I need to get my interval notation. So I write my starting value, which is going to be my leftmost value on my number line. In this case, it goes all the way down forever. So that's -infinity, and it goes up to 1. Then I have to decide whether to include or exclude, whether to use parentheses or brackets. We always exclude or use parentheses on infinity and -infinity. And then since this is less than and not less than or equal to, and since this is an open circle, I'm going to use a parentheses there and not a bracket. So that example shows the difference between solving equations and inequalities, just that one little hiccup if you happen to divide by a negative number. Let's look at another example. Example 6, solve -8 is less than or equal to 3x plus 1 is less than 7. And again, we want to give our answer in interval notation. Now notice this inequality looks very different than the others we've done. It has 2 inequality symbols in it rather than just the one that we had in both of our previous examples. That's okay. We're actually going to still solve this the same way, except now we're going to kind of consider this as an inequality that has 3 sides instead of just 2. So anytime you're doing something to an equation, you do it to both sides of the equation. Now, anytime we do anything to this is called a compound inequality, by the way, we're going to do it to all 3 sides. So the x has to be in the middle. And so I want to get that x term by itself. So I need to get rid of the +1. It's currently added, so I subtract. I subtract it from all 3 sides of the inequality. So here in the middle, the ones cancel and I have 3x. On the left, I have -8 minus 1, which is -9. And on the right, I have 7 minus 1, which is 6. So just do the operation to all 3 parts. And then I need to get the x by itself. It's currently being multiplied by 3, which means I need to divide by 3 to get rid of that. I divide by 3 in all 3 places, the left, the middle, and the right. In the middle, my 3's cancel and I have an x. I did not divide by a negative number, so I don't need to flip the inequalities. So my inequalities are going to stay the same. On the left, -9 divided by 3 is -3. And on the right, 6 divided by 3 is 2. So now my answer is the compound inequality -3 less than or equal to x is less than 2. So let's go ahead and write this on a number line. So I've got -3, -2, -1, 0, 1, and 2. X has to be bigger than 3, but also it has to be less than 4. And so this comes out to being between -3 and 2. And so then from there, I need to decide, do I include or do I exclude my -3 and my 2? Here I have a less than or equal to symbol, and so that means this is going to be a closed circle. And in contrast, I've got a less than symbol here, so this is going to be an open circle. So then in my interval notation, I write my starting value, which it starts, I look left to right, it starts at -3. Looking left to right will preserve the correct order, but we always want to make sure the smallest values go on the left, just like the smallest values go on the left on the number line. -3, and it stops at 2. We need to decide whether we're including or excluding these numbers. -3, since it's less than or equal to, since I have a closed circle, this is going to be a bracket. I'm going to include it. And for 2, since this is less than and not less than or equal to, since this is an open circle, I'm going to use a parentheses. So there is my solution to that inequality. As always, if you have any questions as you're working through this assignment, please don't hesitate to send me a message and ask those questions.